Hello, everybody. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ, or the 12 apostles. I basically just asked at ChatGPT because I became interested in basically who were they and what they did after Jesus and before Jesus, and more or less like what type of personality they each had. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of the 12 disciples and their personality is kind of like, why 12, right? Because there are, for example, 12 zodiac signs, if you guys know. Oh, yeah, and I'm rocking my Patrick sweater. I'm going to be posting a picture of that if you guys want to see it later on. But yeah, I was thinking, or asking myself, is there like relation between like the number 12, as like a lot of there are like 12 hours in like half a day, 24 in a full day and night. The idea of like the circle, right? 360 degrees and things like that. But I didn't really find any correlation, or I haven't really seen one so far. If you do see one, let me know. But I'm basically just going to be breaking them down, talking about each one of the disciples, each one of the apostles. And their names change, right? And especially from like Spanish to English, or English to Spanish. And some of them have two names or more. So I'm going to be talking about that. A lot of them are fishermen. And, this is because what Jesus was trying to basically communicate is that anybody could be like a follower, right? Anybody could be a believer and loyal to faith. So for this video, I'm going to be going through each one of the 12 apostles, and I'm going to be showing pictures of them while I'm speaking, so you can take a look at them too. The first one is Peter, or Simon. Okay, so Peter, or also known as Simon, before Jesus, he was basically a fisherman by trade, and his original name was Simon. So Peter is the one that we know as the keeper of the gates, or the keys into heaven, right? Saint Peter. And this is very interesting. His personality says that he was impulsive, passionate, and a natural leader. So we could say that he was just like a leader. And I don't know, I think this is the way in which Jesus kind of met them, because I think Judas Iscariot was the last one. Even though there are like two Judases, there are like a couple Johns, a couple Simons, right? And it says that in regards to Peter, he was bold in his declarations, but also struggled with fear, as seen in his denial of Jesus. So he denies Jesus, um, and just as Judas, but Judas actually betrays him. And after Jesus, Peter became the leader of the early Christian church, often regarded as the first pope by the Catholic Church. He preached extensively, particularly in Jerusalem and Rome, and was martyred by crucifixion. So I think every one of these 12 guys ended up being murdered or killed. I think only one of them died of natural causes. And I think they all went out to become like missionaries, right? I think it would be very interesting, especially now in the era of like streaming and series and Netflix, to like make a series on them, like an episode of each one of their lives, like before and after, or I don't know, just get creative with it. I think it would be very interesting, because even if you don't believe in God, or even if you're not Christian, this is historical, this is history, right? The second one is Andrew, and before Jesus, a couple of these guys were brothers. See here it says Andrew was a fisherman too, and he was the brother of Peter. And his personality was like humble and approachable. He is often seen as someone who quietly brought others to Jesus. And as I was reading this list, I kind of thought like, well, the first one was Peter. If I were to relate it with the zodiac sign, it would be like Aries, impulsive, passionate. And then Andrew would be like the second sign of the zodiac, which would be like Taurus. And in this case, he did his duty, but he did it like more quietly, right? And after Jesus, Andrew is credited with spreading Christianity in what is now Eastern Europe. And he was also martyred by crucifixion, but on an X-shaped cross, right? So Let me know in the comments if you know the difference between an X-shaped cross and like the cross, the Christian cross. Third one is James the Greater. Before Jesus, he was also a fisherman. And there's like a reason why I think there's like a metaphor and some symbolism with the fisherman, because Jesus said, just like you catch fish, you need to catch the hearts of men, right? And he's the brother of John. John is the next one I'm going to talk about, the fourth one. But James the greater because he was the oldest, I think. There's the greater and the lesser. I think it has to do with age. He was ambitious and bold and sometimes seen as a son of thunder. So that's pretty interesting too. I gotta check what that means, because I think these guys were. See, James in Spanish is Santiago, and he's like the guy who's on a horse with a sword. So yeah, obviously he was ambitious and bold. After Jesus, he was the first apostle to be martyred. So he's the first one that like dies, beheaded by King Herod Agrippa the first around 44 AD. The fourth one is John, and it says he was also a fisherman before Jesus, and he was the younger brother of James the Greater, younger. And in this case, his personality, he is known for his deep love and loyalty to Jesus. He is often called the disciple whom Jesus loved. So I'm guessing Jesus loved all his disciples, or maybe not, or maybe he loved him the most. And after Jesus, John became a major theological writer and was the only apostle believed to have died of natural causes. So this is him, John. He authored the Gospel of John, 3 epistles, and the book of Revelations. So the book of Revelations is the very famous one everybody knows, where it talks about the four horsemen, hunger, war, conquest, and there's another one. Obviously, the apocalypse, the end of the world, right? So this is him. Philip, before Jesus, it says he was likely also a fisherman, but this is less certain. He was curious and analytical, known for asking Jesus pointed questions. I think he's the one that when Jesus was like, we're going to feed everybody fish and bread, he was the one that was like, but how are we going to do that if there are like 5,000 people here? Right? I'm thinking Philip is, and I think him and another guy, one of the other apostles, like actually ends up leaving, and then they're looking for him, and the other guy, I think something like that. But I can see society being a lot like Philip, right? In terms of like if God were to come, right, and everybody would be like skeptical or curious as to like, or analytical, like, but how is that God, or why are we, like all like yeah, like all inquisitive, like all judgmental and stuff. But yeah, he asked them about I know he asked them about the fish, and he asked them about something else, like how is it we're gonna do that, or something like that. And after Jesus, he preached in Asia Minor, and was martyred by crucifixion too. Then the sixth one we have Bartholomew, I think, also known as Nathaniel. Before Jesus, he was thought to have been of noble birth, possibly a scholar. So maybe he came from money. I think this is the only guy that may have come from money. His personality is sincere and without guile, without deception, and initially skeptical of Jesus. I'm pretty sure all these guys were initially skeptical, but then eventually they came to believe in him as the Son of God, right? And after Jesus, Bartholomew spread Christianity in Armenia and India, where he was flayed alive and then beheaded. Damn, this is he was whipped, right? Like his skin was tearing out of his body, and then he was beheaded. Poor guy. And then the seventh one is Matthew. See, a lot of these we kind of know as like the book of Matthew. Matthew is very interesting. His other name was Levi, and before Jesus, he was a tax collector, which was considered a sinful and despised occupation, right? Like kind of now how we would think of like CEOs or bankers, like you guys are just greedy after money. His personality was precise and methodical, qualities that are reflected in his gospel. So there's a lot to say about Matthew and his writing of the gospel, because after Jesus, he wrote the gospel according to Matthew and preached in Judea before possibly moving to Ethiopia, where he was martyred. But the reason that he was able to give an account so structured, see, I haven't read the book of Matthew, or the gospel according to Matthew, but it says that he was able to structure like Jesus' life, like from the moment I think he was born until like he died, and he was structured in the way that he wrote, because as being a tax collector, he had to have that methodical, precise outlook of life, right? So his personality helped him to write that way. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, Thomas, also known as Didymus, I think. Before Jesus, possibly a fisherman, little is known about his early life. Personality, skeptical and inquisitive. So Jesus did have like some pretty skeptical people around him, which I think is sometimes good to have like people around you that like challenge you. And he is best known for doubting Jesus's resurrection until he saw proof. Oh yeah, this is the guy that I think was like, I don't believe Jesus came back after he got crucified, after he resurrected. But then when he saw him, I think he's the one that puts his fingers in the palm of Jesus's hand, right, to see the holes that Jesus had from the nail. And after Jesus, Thomas is believed to have spread Christianity in India, where he was martyred by spearing. All right, so he was speared, and yeah, if you see a lot of these guys like went out of the area, right? Some to Europe, some to India. Then we have nine, James the Lesser. Before Jesus, he was possibly a tradesman, such as a carpenter, but little is known. His personality, he was quiet and reserved. He played a less prominent role among the apostles. So I think this is the guy that uh, didn't do that much. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what it says around about his personality. After Jesus, he led the Jerusalem church, which I think is a big deal. So I'm not sure if he didn't really do much. But it says a prominent role among the apostles. So maybe after Jesus, he played a bigger role in things, because a lot of these guys established Christianity, right? They were the founders, along with Jesus, of this religion, which is like the world's most popular religion, right? And he is believed to have been martyred by being thrown from a pinnacle of the temple and then clubbed to death, right? Like, dang, like these guys had a bad end to their lives. The 10th one is Jude, or Thaddeus. Before Jesus, not much is known about his early life. He was compassionate and concerned about spiritual matters, um, which I think had to do with like the Jew religion, or Judaism, right? And after Jesus, he is credited with writing the Epistle of Jude and spreading Christianity in various regions. He was martyred possibly in Armenia. So I think it's interesting how I think these guys had a religion. They were Jewish. I think all of them were Jewish, but maybe they saw like the corruption at the time, just like any institution gets corrupt. The Christian church also got corrupt, right? Especially like in the Middle Ages with the what is it, with the Spanish Inquisition, right? And these guys were kind of in a way like rebels, right? And I'm saying this because the 11th one I think is my favorite, is the one that I've been kind of like looking at the most. Simon the Zealot. And before Jesus, he was a member of the Zealots, Zealots, which was a political movement that sought to overthrow Roman rule. So Jesus had in his group of disciples like this rebel guy, right? Like anarchist, right? Like, well, not anarchist, but like this guy that was really like, you know, like it says here, his personality was zealous and passionate. So that's like motivated, very like upbeat, right? Like energetic, likely fervent about Jewish law. So this was a guy that was already like, yeah, like let's overthrow the established order, the status quo, and let's set up something new, which is a pretty cool guy to have in your group when you're, preaching like new things, right? As Jesus was, or maybe just, bringing back forgotten things. After Jesus, he preached the gospel in various regions and was martyred, possibly by being sawn in half. So he was like, I'm guessing he was sawed off in half, like poor guy. And the last one, number 12, is Judas Iscariot. I think I'm pronouncing Iscariot wrong. But before Jesus, it says he likely came from a town called Kiriath and may have handled the group's finances. So he was like the administrator, we could say, to a certain extent. Excuse me. It says in relation to his personality, he was greedy and treacherous. So he might have been that guy in the group that's kind of like, you know, kind of like checking out the scene, seeing what he can get, what he can benefit from the rest. You know that friend in the group, and and it says as seen in his betrayal of Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, right? So his loyalty had a price here. After Jesus, though, Judas's remorse led him to commit suicide by hanging. After betraying Jesus, his role was later filled by Matthias. And Matthias was the guy that I think, well, there's actually talk about a 13th disciple, but not condoned by Jesus or not appointed by Jesus, because it was after Jesus' death. And in this case, it was Paul, who later changes his name to Saul. And the reason they changed their names was because it was like, I think either Jesus changed it for them or they would change their names themselves. But it was because it was like a symbolic thing to, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it was like a way to restart a new life, right? Like I was this person before, but now I'm this person, right? It's like, like Peter. Simon was this person, with a lot of flaws, with a lot of temptations, right? And Peter is now this more virtuous, more controlled, more regulated, more compassionate guy, right? And then I believe that's why they changed their names. So yeah, Paul was Paul first, and then he was Saul. And Matthias, in this case, I guess took after the group's finances. I don't know if these guys kept in touch after Jesus's death. I think some of them may have, but I do know that they had like very tragic endings. And for me, it's kind of like mind-boggling how we haven't had like a series, like, I don't want to say, because there is a series. It's called The Apostles from 2001 documentary. But I mean, I don't know if this is like blasphemy, but why don't you make it like Hollywood, right? Why don't you tell the stories of these 12 men, like in a Hollywood way, right? Like in an engaging, dynamic, entertaining way. Why don't you do that? Because we all know society is kind of sick, and we all love watching sex and violence, like Family Guy says, on TV. And these guys had an untimely death, right? They had very tragic deaths. Very like they suffered. So, and they did good things because they preached, right? Jesus's sermons and Christianity. I don't know much about all this, but I did think it was interesting, because I think it's something that everybody knows of, right? Like the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles, but nobody ever really, unless you're a believer, like a real believer, you don't really know much about it, right? Like me, like I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, but I don't really know much about it, right? So I think it would, and I was thinking like I could just watch some videos on it or ask ChatGPT. But again, those videos are like kind of boring, right? Because they're like documentaries and it's just some guy showing you pictures and like talking. But why can't we see that like brought to life? Like Mel Gibson's The Passion, right? But instead of focusing on Jesus, we focus on the apostles. I think that would be very interesting. So yeah, that's all I got for this video. Let me know what you guys think of this, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.